Do you ever have trouble landing your jab? Sure, we all do. So what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you what. You get yourself a rash guard with a camouflage left sleeve so he will never see it coming. My left hand is now virtually invisible. Can't see that, can you, Xiao?
No, where's the left hand?
I know, right? Camouflage sleeves from xmartial.com. Go check them out. They'll never see you coming. And welcome back for part 2 of my conversation with Xiao. So, Xiao had his fight over the weekend, and what happened?
I won.
He won! He won, and it was glorious. It was like the second coming of Bruce Lee. Well,
Oh, that's pushing it.
is it though? Is it though? It's like what people picture how Bruce Lee would fight if he actually fought.
The Church of JKD is coming for me.
Yes, the Church of Jeet Kune Do
But I am Cantonese
has already
though.
excommunicated. Oh, you are?
I may not speak Cantonese, but I am Cantonese. I'm
You're
born in
ethnically
Shenzhen.
Cantonese?
Yeah, so I get to do the Bruce Lee poses and well, I'm ethnically that's my dad is from the north. His entire side of the family is from Tianjin and Beijing and Dongbei, which literally means northeast. That region. My mother is from Nanjing. Her entire family is, but I am born in Shenzhen.
So if you don't know what that means, basically Xiao is ethnically entitled to do Bruce Lee poses.
Yeah.
Which he totally did. It's not cultural
Appropriation.
cultural appropriation, yes. So on the walk out to the cage, Xiao was doing like the Bruce Lee poses and the Beijing opera sounds that Bruce Lee was so famous for. And you did that during the fight as well. Between rounds, you were doing the posing and
Yeah.
that
I
was
regret
fun.
not doing it during the fight, but hey man, I'm fighting. I gotta make every second count. If I do a Bruce Lee pose during the fight, I might have missed an opportunity to bomb rush my opponent.
So I was reffing this fight, and it's a weird thing, reffing fights for your own students, but it happens sometimes. So I always try to be impartial. I try not to... When you're reffing your own students, at least for me, I always try to err on the side of caution of not showing favoritism. So, yeah. What was that like, fighting with me as the referee? Was that strange?
It was
at all?
comforting.
Okay.
You are an important coach to me, probably the most important coach to me. When I started training in America, a lot of my coaches didn't take me seriously because I'm a right-handed southpaw. I am innovative with my striking.
Yeah, and you like sidekicks.
Sometimes to my own detriment.
Yeah.
Ramsey took me seriously. Well, he had... Ramsey, you had the same experience too, right? As a Taekwondo fighter.
Yeah.
Transitioning to kickboxing. So you kind of know what I'm going through, even though I never did Taekwondo.
Yeah, Taekwondo players, they train both sides, and they're always switching stance.
Oh, that
and
I
it's
cannot
super annoying for boxing coaches and Muay Thai coaches to deal with a Taekwondo player, whether high level or low level or whatever, because they are always switching stance, and they're like, just pick one and stick to it. Stop hopping around like that. It's annoying. I don't know how to deal with it. Right, so that wasn't particularly helpful for me, to be honest. I mean, in the long run, yeah, learning to be a strict orthodox fighter and learning to be a strict southpaw fighter and learning how both sides work is very constructive, but just having a coach yelling at you, telling everything you're doing is wrong is not very helpful.
It's demoralizing.
Yeah, exactly.
It shows the coach doesn't necessarily care.
And I know a lot of coaches where if a guy like Xiao, if Xiao had come in to their gym and said, hey, train me, they would have told him exactly that. Everything you're doing is wrong, and you'll never amount to anything moving like that, fighting like that. When what they're really saying is, I don't know how to coach you. That's a radically different thing.
Well, I was in a Muay Thai gym for one summer. Sitiao Tong, we talked about it.
Yeah.
And one of the assistant coaches saw that I'm southpaw. He said, "Are you left-handed?" I said, "No, I'm right-handed, but this is just the way I fight. I've been doing this for a while now." And he came up to me and whispered to me, "Next time, just say you are left-handed, so people will not bother you anymore." Like, okay, why do I have
Note
to lie?
to all the right-handed southpaws out there: just tell people you're left-handed; they won't bother you.
Yeah, we all know right-handed southpaws are not real.
You know, I can write with my left hand. When I was a kid, I had an injury with my right hand. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I banged up my wrist pretty badly. I couldn't write with my right hand for a long time. And so I took it upon myself to teach myself to write and to draw and to do calligraphy and everything else with my left hand. So I can write just fine and perfectly legibly, and I can draw and all this other stuff with my left hand as well. But yeah. It's not that hard to figure out, to be honest. It's not. You just need to practice a little bit every day and you can do it. My grandma, she was right-handed, but she lost most of her right hand except her thumb in she used to work in a plywood factory when she was a teenager. Like at age 15, she had like this part of her hand is sawed off, like all the four fingers up to there. All that was left was the thumb. And so she had to learn how to write with her left hand, but she never got good at it though. Like her writing was always terrible with her left hand. But she learned how to do everything else. Like she could crochet like no one else with her left hand. But
not to make it lighthearted, but isn't that kind of like Bill Wallace's story? He's right-handed, right, Bill Wallace? Or is he left?
I think he was right-handed, but he switched stance because he tore his ACL. So if I'm not mistaken, and I probably am because I always get these things backwards, let's assume he was a right-handed guy who fought orthodox, and he tore up his left ACL. I'm probably getting this backwards. And so he switched and put his other leg in front, let's say it's his right leg, to try to avoid extra damage on the left. Maybe.
I think he can only use his left leg.
Yeah.
Not entirely sure. Okay, let's check up on that later.
Bill Wallace fans, correct us in the comments. I did a video on Bill Wallace before, and I got like 300 comments like, "No, it was at Bill Wallace's other leg. You're wrong. Educate yourself." And thanks to all those comments, that video got boosted up by the YouTube algorithms. So please, let me know how wrong I am in the comments down below.
Later, haters.
I love to monetize the haters' comments, man. It's a beautiful thing. So note to aspiring YouTubers, don't be afraid of getting some details wrong when you talk about stuff online. Because the haters will correct you, and when they correct you, it will simply boost your video's visibility on YouTube. There's one of my secrets.
Yeah, haters are great, man. Look at the Paul brothers.
Yeah, I mean,
Kardashians.
I've never actually had any of their videos recommended to me. I've never actually watched any of their videos.
Me neither.
Although, Logan Paul's YouTube video editor, his videos did get recommended to me, and I had no idea he was even affiliated with Logan Paul. The guy makes some really interesting videos about how to edit and, editing tricks and software tips and so on. And then, so I subscribed to him. I'm like, wow, this guy is really interesting. This is really, really cool information and so on. And then he's doing a video with Logan Paul about how they edited a video, and I was like, oh, this is Logan Paul's video editor. Huh, how interesting. And I've got more subscribers than him. So...
the behind-the-scenes workers, man, they are underappreciated.
They are, because this guy's really talented. I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. Logan Paul's video editor. There you go. Super talented guy. Yeah, super underappreciated. Without him, Logan Paul probably would not be anywhere near as successful as he is.
One moment, please. I will grab the mosquito spray.
There is a mosquito on the
These
camera
little fuckers
right now.
need to die. Can I swear on the podcast?
I mean, I guess maybe we should bleep it out. I don't know. YouTube is really cracking down on foul language, and I never use foul language on my channel.
Yeah, you are a religious man. I am not. I'm the opposite of that.
But every once in a while, as long as it doesn't move, it's okay. You stay right there, mosquito, and you're okay. The mosquito situation has been mostly resolved. It is mosquito season. In Shanghai, yeah, for now. We just killed like 5 or 6 of them. Animals were harmed during the making of this podcast.
They deserved it.
They were the
mosquitoes,
aggressors. They were the aggressors. They drew first blood.
Yeah, they did.
So, let's take a look at Xiao's fight and comment on it. So pull that thing up, Xiao.
We will.
We're gonna watch it on a tiny phone screen, and we'll put the thing up in a big format so you guys can see. All right. So,
Just the start of the first round.
the touch gloves go back to their corner. Xiao in the dark short sleeve rash guard, and his opponent. What was your opponent's name?
Wu Zongchen.
He's coming out hot in that
Call him
first round.
Mr. Hu.
And that was interesting because there was a little slip, and then you grab his leg like you're going for an ankle pick, and
Yeah, because
How'd
you
you
were
get the-
standing over me like Muhammad Ali with his fist raised. I think he might have tried to hit me. So I thought, no, I have to display dominance. So I worked a single leg.
that was interesting. That display of dominance, because even though it doesn't do damage, it lets him know, hey, you're not in charge. And it worked. It
It's
worked.
psychological. If I was comfortable with MMA, I would have signed up for that, which I'm not. But I let him know, hey, if this is an MMA fight, I've got more to bring to the table than you. And I taunt him a little here.
And this is where you start like ramping it up a bit at this point.
The taunt
First-
got to him.
Yeah, first essentially he showed you his power in the first 30 seconds right there. But at the same time he showed you this is the extent of my power. Like it doesn't go beyond this. Whereas at this point you're just really getting started.
Yeah, in the first round, one of the first conclusions I drew was I can weather this. He can't hurt me bad. It's not just the power, it's
That's a
that
nice sidekick.
I can read his timing, I can read his patterns.
He goes for another time. You had some nice head movement in here in this fight. Like when he throws the straight right, you're slipping that every time.
Yeah, because he's always left, right when punching. He finishes with a round kick. It's always the right round kick.
Like how many direct hits did you take during the whole fight?
I'm sure a lot of punches, not a lot, but a few punches slipped through my guard. But he stunned me solidly once in the first round. Definitely didn't rock me, but just stunned me a bit.
Yeah.
But that was because I made a mistake boxing. And he probably hit me with 2 solid round kicks on the right side in the first round, and that's about it.
Hands raised between rounds. Where'd you learn that from, man?
You taught me that.
Good.
It's so funny here. I'm walking around and you're telling me, "Hey, get out of the cage."
Yeah, this is kind of a weird event because the corners were not allowed to come into the cage between rounds, as is normally the case, so the fighters had to leave the cage during the break.
TJ lied to me. He said I can sit down in between rounds, and I tried sitting on the stairs, and I was kicked from the stairs.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because both fighters end up being coached between rounds in the same place. So there are no secrets.
It's not like we can hear each other. It's loud in there.
Yeah. And they're playing music the whole time, which is kind of strange, but
Hey,
it
at
is
least
what
the
it is.
music for our fight is not that annoying.
You did a really nice job setting up the kicks, especially your left kick.
Huh. Yeah,
Which
I had
is-
some success with left cheeks, but the left round kick I only used twice. With no great effect. But spoiler alert, later I did knock him down with a left cheek.
Yes. Not just knocked him down, but he was down for an 8 count before he finally got up, and he was basically done after that. And the fight had like 10 more seconds in it.
To be fair, I think he's more tired than hurt.
Yeah.
He's just like, screw it, this is not fun
He
anymore.
was reevaluating his life decisions at that point. Like, is it worth it to get back up and take more?
He's a high volume button spammer. When his stamina gauge empties, he's got nothing.
Another nice right side kick right there.
I think I'm a bad stylistic matchup for him because he's a spammer, but I've got his timing down.
Yeah, your counters, especially counters with the side kick, were on point right there.
I'm kind of surprised I did as good a job as I did countering with a side kick.
Right there.
I don't always. The thing is, in sparring, my training partners all know that I'm a side kicker, so they respect it and they try to counter it and all that. But this guy, he knows I'm going to side kick beforehand, but he's never seen it. He doesn't have the same level of respect for my side kick. He doesn't have my timing down.
Yeah.
And he's not big on timing in general. He's a spammer.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how distracted were you by the ring girls?
0. I don't find them attractive. I like teenage-looking Asian anime-ish girls. Those are not my type. Call me the P word if you want.
All right, so let's get back into the fight here. Round 3. Xiao using evasive maneuvers, moving in and out, landing some strikes.
CJ was a bit worried when I ducked left there because it looked for a second like he would head kick me, which would not be present. But I think I was a fair distance away.
Crazy overhand right there.
Oh, Jason was giving me so much advice during this fight. His penetrating voice, his passion. Oh, I like this sequence. I counter side kick him and then slip and then ground kick
nice
right
one.
after.
Like for a first amateur fight, this is a really solid performance.
Maybe not the best skill, but it's got a lot of content.
So a nice
Tackle
left
6
hand you
minutes.
had right there. Like it was a switch stance left hook you threw there.
Huh. I think it's I as a southpaw I dipped to my right side and then I threw a hopping hook. It's a technique I learned from Gabriel Varga, I think.
Oh, there's the knockdown.
Yeah.
Oh, we skipped the
It's a
replay.
replay, yeah. I edited in some replays for important.
That's a nice knockdown, man. Knockdown with a teep. Like it wasn't just imbalanced. Like there was enough power behind there to physically knock him
Pretty
off his
sure
feet.
I rocked him with a hook before that, a right hook.
Yeah.
My right hook is surprisingly successful all night. But my left straight, the most important southpaw punch, is less successful than I thought it would be. Probably because he kept a tight center guard, so I just did the left overhand instead. And the left overhand worked fairly well. And now we're growling, still slipping that right hand and double leg!
Oh yeah, I forgot you double legged him at the end of the fight.
MMA, baby! That doesn't score any points, but that's an emphatic finish.
It was an emphatic finish, and you know it's like what am I supposed to do? Say, oh, no takedowns, sorry, with 0 seconds left in the fight. I mean, I've seen that sort of thing happen.
And I was also just defending myself from the kick.
I also loved your sportsmanship. Like as soon as the bell rang for the 3rd round, you ran over and held up your opponent's hand, and.
Well, we were quite friendly with each other even before the fight, but like we could both see it in each other's eyes. We are competitors. We are competitive little pricks who want to take the W. And during the fight, we did the most taunting of any fight that night. We were extremely immature and childish. And maybe that's what the audience loved about this, is a passionate fight.
I think you said before this was like a live-action fighting video game where you're spamming the taunt button.
Yeah, it's like we're playing online. Taunting the heck out of each other. But yeah, I have respect for this young man.
Yeah.
He's only 15 years old, allegedly only trained for 3.5 months. And he's mad talented. I would say he's way more talented than I am. I was never a fast learner at martial arts. If you saw what I was able to do after training like 2 months of Dutch kickboxing, he would laugh his butt off. I was pathetic.
Oh man, at age 15, oh man, anybody would have beat me at age 15. I was the puniest, weakest, most uncoordinated creature on the planet, I think. So, man.
Harsh on yourself, aren't you?
No, it's just the truth, man. It's just the truth. Like I was a really small, sickly child. Like I was underfed. I was underweight. I weighed like 90 pounds. at age 18 at the height of 6'1".
Looking at you now, it's a bit hard to believe, but
Yeah, it's hard to believe. But you know what? As long as you're alive, you can make physical changes for the better or
I don't know
or
which
for
is
the worse.
more incredible, the 80-year-old Tai Chi master or you being 90 pounds at age 18. But do go on.
You know what? Because of that 8-year-old Tai Chi master that I met, that dude inspired me to make lifelong fitness a goal. Like to just never ever quit. And to do something every day to get stronger, do something every day to get more technical, to do something every day to get more flexible. And whether or not that allows me to, be a competent fighter at age 80 and be able to do backflips at age 80 like this guy could, I don't know. I don't care. But what it will do is improve quality of life.
Hey, look at Jackie Chan. He's got a ton of injuries too, and he's like 70. He's still doing pretty good in action movies. I know that's not a fighter.
Yeah, but he's a guy who stays physically fit and he keeps moving, and he's made physical culture part of his life.
Michael Jai White and Donnie Yen, both guys in their 50s.
Yeah.
With legitimate skill.
Yeah.
More than legitimate, I would say amazing skills.
Yes.
I think those two would have done great as fighters. I see something special in them.
Yeah, man. I made a video about Michael Jai White recently, and a ton of folks in the comments were like, "Oh, he's on steroids. That's why he looks the way he does."
What if he is?
Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. I don't know. But what he's achieved physically, like that physique is achievable in your 50s without the use of performance-enhancing drugs. That's not an unreasonable expectation.
It's just my opinion, but I don't think performance enhancement drugs are that bad. I don't think they're bad at all. Some of them do have negative effects. But,
Yeah. It does annoy me a lot, though, when people accuse everyone's stronger than you being on steroids, basically.
they should just get some steroids themselves. Not like people on steroids don't work out.
Here's a hilarious thing about Jiu Jitsu.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, I don't know how many times you've heard it, but over the course of the last few decades, I've heard so many times people say, Jiu Jitsu is not about size and strength, you don't need strength to
it
Jiu
is.
Jitsu, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Everybody knows strength is super helpful with all combat sports. Strength is super helpful with Jiu Jitsu. Yes, you need to know the technique. When all technique is even, the stronger guy is going to win. So, that being said, at the same time, people see guys like Andre Galvao, who's just like, ripped and stacked and super muscular, and they're like, well, it's because he's on steroids. Yeah. Yeah, and they'll always say, oh, all these jiu-jitsu guys are on steroids. And that's why they're winning. Okay, which one is it, guys? Does size and strength not matter? Because if it doesn't matter, why do we care if they're on steroids?
It may not be the same guys saying those things.
Okay, they're maybe not. That's a bit of a straw man argument I'm offering there, but just assuming all the people of the internet are the same person, which they're totally not. But yeah, seriously though, which one is it? Does size and strength not matter, or are we supposed to care whether or not jiu-jitsu athletes take steroids?
There are different kinds of steroids too.
Yeah.
Like Joe Rogan takes testosterone replacement, according to him, to restore his testosterone to the level of an 28-year-old, I think. I think that's perfectly valid. He's a successful man. He has the money. Why not invest some of it in himself?
Yeah.
Why is it only valid if he buys sports cars and mansions, but not valid?
And it's
when
not like he's
invested
competing in a
himself?
sport where that's illegal or anything.
Yeah, competing in a sport is different, but maybe a steroid division would be good too.
It would be interesting.
Okay, don't quote me
It would
on
be
that.
very interesting. I don't know how I feel about that, because think about Pride FC, for example. There was like a kind of an unspoken agreement that they could take whatever they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And they wouldn't be tested or penalized for it. And so there were some crazy freak show fights in Pride, and the fans loved it, and people still love watching those old matches to this day. But what if there was something like that right now? I don't know. Tell you what I would be a lot more interested in seeing, besides, a steroid division in the UFC. as funny as that sounds, I would be interested in seeing like a UFC 1 style tournament with UFC 1 rules with modern MMA fighters. Because the original UFC, like no rules, no time limit, no weight classes, no gloves. But we also had no mixed martial artists. We had Royce Gracie, who knew Jiu Jitsu, and a bunch of guys who didn't know what grappling was. But what if we had that format, but with modern fighters who really know how to fight? Modern, real mixed martial artists. Where we have evenly matched opponents. I think that would be super interesting. Maybe not. Maybe it would be terrible and boring and bad television. But
I think I partially agree. Maybe get rid of the rounds if both fighters agree to it. But I think keeping the gloves might be good for protecting the hands so the fighters can fight long term. Maybe get rid of stupid rules like 12 to 6 elbows, or
yes,
maybe allow kneeing the head, say in a sprawl position, or just kicking in a ground fight situation. But those are more political issues than sports issues.
That's true. That's true. So many people confuse that, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Like the 12 to 6 elbow is a political issue. It absolutely is. It's not a sports issue. I mean, the doctor on the New Jersey State Athletic Control Board, who was responsible for
New Jersey.
This was a boxing commission, but they had basically a boxing ring doctor look at some MMA fights, and he saw one. I think it was Orlando. Blanking on Orlando's last name. Orlando something or other fought Remco Pardoel. And Remco gets Orlando on the ground. Orlando's a Muay Thai fighter. Remco's a much, much larger European, like Japanese jiu-jitsu stylist.
Grappler.
And a grappler basically. And Remco just starts dropping the 12 to 6 elbows on Orlando's head, like right on the temple in a position where he can't defend himself. The doctor sees this fight and he's like, I will not sign off on a sport that allows this elbow. Because it was a pretty obscene situation.
Sure.
If the referee had stepped in after maybe like 3 of those and called it a TKO, which he should have, I think anybody could agree, okay, that's an acceptable level of violence. But since we saw like boom, boom, just so many until Orlando was knocked out cold, and then Remco was the one who stopped the fight himself. He looked up at the ref like, he's out. You gonna do anything about this? And then after the fact, the referee's like, okay, you win.
Very incompetent ref more than anything.
Yeah, but still back then, nobody knew what the referee was supposed to do. Like what Rorion Gracie told the referees was essentially, it's a death fight. Don't stop for anything. Only stop if they're knocked out or if they tap. And that's it. Well, which was terrible. I mean, I'm so glad that John McCarthy pushed to allow the referee to call a TKO.
That was not a thing.
It wasn't a thing.
Oof.
Like,
different era.
When Taylor Tooley, that big sumo guy in UFC 1, fought, what's his name? The Sabat guy, the kickboxer with the karate pants. I don't remember his name. Anyway, Taylor Tooley takes a kick and a punch to the mouth, gets his tooth knocked out. He's bloodied up. He's on the ground. The referee jumps in and wisely stops the fight. Any good referee today would call that fight a TKO. He's on the ground, he's knocked down, his eyes are rolling back, his tooth is out, he's in a position where he's not intelligently defending himself. His opponent is about to pounce on him and do additional damage. And Rorion Gracie got so pissed off about this, and he called this referee out, and he was like, essentially, you're fired, let's get somebody else in here who will follow instructions. And so they got John McCarthy, and John McCarthy is like, I will only step in if you give me the authority to stop the fight in the case of a guy not being able to defend himself.
Good on him.
Yeah. But, because of that Remco fight where the fighter is the one who stopped the fight rather than the referee, man, that doctor, and I don't blame him because it looked horrific. That doctor banned the 12 to 6 elbow. And it didn't matter what John McCarthy said because he was pushing for the 12 to 6 elbow. He was like, it's not more damaging than the round elbow, which is illegal. And the doctor's thinking, maybe we should ban those too. So eventually they compromised. All right, fine, you can You can take the 12 to 6 elbow, but give us this other thing, basically.
12 to 6 elbow isn't even that good. I think nowadays we don't see as much mauling in ground fighting because even the strikers are somewhat competent grapplers. But it's worth pointing out that if a grappler dominates a non-grappler in a side control or even better a crucifix, he can land as many elbows as he wants.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like we saw this again in the early UFC where Gary Goodrich fought, what's his name? The wrestler, really good wrestler. And Gary Goodrich locks him up in a crucifix. The dude goes for a fireman carry. Was it Cal Worsham? No, I don't remember. Anyway, wrestler goes for a fireman's carry. On the way over, Gary, since he's much bigger, is able to just hold on to the wrestler's arm and leg, get him in a crucifix, roll him onto the back, and just start hammering these elbows. And they're from the side, so even in the modern UFC, this would be legal because since it's not the 12 to 6 elbow. But this was
the same.
The mechanics are exactly the same, but the angle is different, so it's technically legal. It's stupid, but it's the way it is. But that fight was even more brutal because you saw his head bobbling around like this as he's getting slammed with the elbows. And again, it was Gary, the fighter, who stopped the fight, not the referee. So, man, those endings were brutal. Do you remember, what's his name? Karate dude with the mustache. His name is on the tip of my tongue. I think I just swallowed a mosquito when I breathed.
Are you okay?
It was flying in my mouth. I'm going to have to watch this video in slow motion.
Do you want to drink some water?
I'm okay, man. I'm okay. Fred Edish. Okay, Fred Edish. He fought. I forgot how to speak English. He fought. Was it Pat Berry? I don't remember. He fought this big kickboxer, several times his size, and Fred Edish just takes one of the most brutal beatings in the early UFC. But bless his heart, Fred Edish, even at this point in his life, had no quit in him, and he just would not stop, and he kept getting up and kept pressing forward, and just kept taking a beating, and it was bloody, it was brutal. Again, any good referee today would have stopped it much earlier on. To Fred's credit, man, as an older man, he kept studying mixed martial arts, he kept studying Jiu Jitsu. He had another professional fight like 10 years later against a guy much younger than him, and he won via submission. So props to Fred Edish for being awesome.
What a stud.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Going from like the absolute worst beating in UFC history, a fight where most guys would have been just absolutely embarrassed to step foot in the octagon again. And as an older man, fights a dude like half his age and beats him. So, what have we learned today, friends? So Xiao had his fight, and this was a kickboxing match in a fight cage. Now, was this your first time in a fight cage?
I think so.
What was that like, being in a cage for the first time? Like, mentally, what did that do to you?
Before the event started, I went into the cage to hop around for a bit to test out its size. I thought no big deal. And once I'm in the cage, when I walked out, the lights were really dark. After I got in the cage, the lights turned on again, and it was almost too bright. And I saw these audience members sitting around the cage. They are all below me elevation-wise, and it was weird. And my opponent trying to bomb rush me under the limelight. I had a moment of realization. I thought, oh man, I'm doing this.
Yeah. Oh, man, those are like the exact same words that echoed through my mind at the beginning of every one of my fights. Every last one of them, like, this is happening now. Whoa. Like there's this moment of clarity where it's no longer a conceptual thing that's going to happen in the future, maybe. Like, it's real at that moment. You're like, whoa, this is happening now. I'm doing this.
Never goes away, huh?
Yeah. It's a weird moment. It's an interesting moment. Because, like, leading up to it, there can be a lot of anxiety. Like, how much pre-fight anxiety did you experience?
In the days leading up to it, very little. I'm not exactly excited either, but I was just kind of neutral. But on the day off, when I was taking the taxi to the venue, I felt a little anxious. And once I'm at the event, I'm more at ease. But the half hour before my fight, since my fight was the 5th of the night, and there was scheduled to be a long break before my fight, so the waiting time wasn't helping.
Yeah, they had some obscenely long breaks in between the fights. I got to the venue at 6 p.m. and I ended up leaving at almost 1 in the morning.
It was not very efficient.
Yeah. Oh man. And Ali, our friend Ali, he ended up fighting at 12:30 at night. That's just way too late for a fighter to be competing. It's
Yeah, may have affected his performance.
Probably did.
He did pull through with a victory.
He did, but man, he was tired and yeah, psyching yourself up for 6 hours straight.
It doesn't work like that.
That's taxing. That takes a toll on you, a big one.
Let's talk about psyching up.
Yeah.
So since there was a long wait before my fight would take place, actually the promoters did not give us a certain time, only an approximate one. So my opponent, who dressed up in shin guards, cup, and everything, after the 4th fight finished, had to wear all that stuff for over an hour, I think.
Yeah.
And he prepared too early. But I, on the other hand, prepared too late. I kept asking the promoter when it would happen, and they said about 10:50. So I thought, okay, I will start putting on the stuff at 10:40. And at 10:40,
yeah, they called your name out. They're playing your intro.
Hey, Xiao!
Intro music.
Your
You're
opponent.
No, Xiao, where are you? The whole song plays, and your opponent's up there waiting in the cage.
I was
nervous.
anxious, mainly because it's such a good song.
And then they played your intro music again, and they're like, Xiao! And then you still don't come out. And then they say your name the 3rd time, and you finally come out. But that was interesting because that was like a Miyamoto Musashi moment. Because unintentionally, but it worked. It had the same type of effect. He would famously show up late to his duels.
What a jerk.
Yeah, it's a huge faux pas in Japanese culture, right? It's just a culture of propriety. Everything must be just so. You do what you say what you do. You're a person of honor and so on. Especially if you're a samurai, my goodness. And so what does a samurai do? We will meet at noon. And so the honorable samurai shows up at noon, and then Miyamoto Musashi shows up an hour late, and the guy's pissed off, and he's psyched himself up for an hour, and he's taxed himself emotionally, and he's worked himself up to this crazy extent, and then Miyamoto Musashi beats him to death with a boat oar.
What a troll, man.
the biggest troll of all. People who haven't read his writings, I think they romanticize Musashi a lot as being oh, he must have been the greatest sword-wielding warrior of all. And no doubt he was an excellent sword-wielding warrior, but he understood the intangibles of the fight game, if you will. He understood the things that you won't learn in the gym, if you will.
Conor McGregor took a page out of his book, it seems.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Conor McGregor would famously, especially when he became a big deal, a big name in the UFC, he would show up late. And this is really interesting. His last fight in the UFC, his last couple fights, I believe, all the fighters show up beforehand. They show up to the pre-fight rules meetings. They have all the meetings. They wait backstage for a couple of hours, sometimes 3 hours. I've had this experience so many times backstage during fights, and it is taxing. It is mentally and physically and emotionally taxing. And what does McGregor do? He shows up 5 minutes before his fight with just enough time to get his hands wrapped and signed off, and then he just walks straight in, and he doesn't have to deal with that emotional anxiety dump. He doesn't have to deal with the pre-fight nerves. He doesn't have to deal with pacing backstage, wondering when it's time to go on. And, seeing his opponent eyeball him from across the locker room, like,
I did a lot of that too.
that is exhausting. That sucks. And Conor McGregor put himself in a position where he did not have to deal with that anymore. That is a massive advantage.
Yeah. And I would say the biggest high for me during the fight was when I walked out. I think it's because I'm late. The crowd were so happy to see me. They were cheering me on. And I walked out with my right arm raised like I already won.
Yeah.
And I got the walkout routine wrong. I thought I'm going straight into the cage, but later I figured out...
Yeah, you start walking toward the cage door and they're like, no, walk the other way.
I'm
glad you didn't get demoralized by that.
No, later I understood that I was supposed to walk around the room, stop at each corner, and then go in the cage. And most fighters, when they... Go on.
My first professional kickboxing match, this was the first time I ever got in a boxing ring. And it was kind of the same thing. They're like, go this way, and I go like the wrong way through the crowd. And they're like, no, we're supposed to follow you with the camera this way. And I get up to the boxing ring, and they're like, okay, go in. I'm like, all right. So I like crawl onto my belly, and I roll under the bottom rope. And they're like opening up the ropes, and they're like, what the heck are you doing? Like, I don't know, it's my first time in a boxing ring.
That's amazing. Oh, so you've not seen a boxing ring?
I'd never been in a boxing ring.
Oh,
That was my first pro kickboxing match. Was the first time I put on boxing gloves in my life. It was the first time I got in a boxing ring in my life. It was the first time I fought shirtless in my life. First time I fought in a pair of shorts in my life. Before that, it was all like Taekwondo and karate. That was my martial arts experience. And I had tons of competition experience in Taekwondo and karate, wearing the dobok, wearing the gi, wearing the belt, and having that nice little swish when you punch and kick. And without that, I felt naked. I felt literally naked, wearing just a pair of shorts.
Like
and with
playing
the
a
gloves.
video game without the sound effects.
Yeah, exactly. Like a video game without the sound effects. That's a perfect analogy. And wearing boxing gloves for the first time, if you don't know how to punch with boxing gloves on, it's a very different body mechanic than punching bare knuckle. Like in karate and taekwondo, when you punch, use the two big knuckles, right? And in a boxing glove, you can't do that. You can't punch the same way because your hand is shaped like this inside the glove, and your thumb is further extended than these two knuckles. And so you try to punch like that, you're going to bang up your thumb. And I didn't know anything about, three knuckle contact like Jack Dempsey taught, and anything about how to use a boxing glove as an effective weapon, because it is a weapon. And so I found myself feeling like I had pillows on my hands, which is something people who've never boxed always say about gloves, like, oh, you're wearing pillows on your hands. They're weapons that allow you to punch a lot harder than you would otherwise. People don't understand this who don't box, but they are weapons.
And it's good to have your hand not broken so you can fight another day.
Yes.
Another day.
I mean, think about it. Going back to John McCarthy and the New Jersey State Athletic Commission penning the original rules of the UFC, right? John McCarthy, he pushed for no gloves. And the head of the boxing commission said, well, of course we're going to have gloves. We have to. It's safer. And John McCarthy handed a boxing glove to the commissioner and said, put that on. He's like, okay. He's like, all right, see this solid oak desk. Punch it as hard as you can with this boxing glove on. The guy's like, okay, boom, and he punches the desk really hard. How does your hand feel? Fine. All right, take the glove off. Now do the same thing. And the guy's like, no. Why not? Because I'm gonna hurt my hand. Exactly. Because you can punch a whole lot harder with a boxing glove on.
But hey, it favors the striker, so I have no problem with it.
Yeah, it does. It does. I suppose in one sense it's nice to have fewer hand injuries, but I think a good compromise would be get rid of the wraps underneath and just have the gloves. That way, you'd cut up the hands less, fewer hand injuries, but you couldn't punch so unrealistically hard that you can literally put holes in people's heads. That's my take on it.
Yeah, that's a real issue.
Maybe that's a terrible idea. I don't know, but it's an idea that I have. Tell me what you think in the comments, please.
Trevor Whitman thinks the UFC gloves are less than ideal as well.
Oh, he's the guy like designing those new gloves.
Yeah,
with a more ergonomically correct shape, supposedly.
One of them at least.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen those gloves, but I would be really interested in trying them out. Like I just got some new sparring gloves from Tatami Fightwear. They don't even make them themselves, they sell them. I'm trying to remember the brand. I got them right over there in my bag, but they were really nice compromise because they curl the fingers over. They're a little bit like the old Pride FC gloves did. And so you can't poke the other guy in the eye unless you make a very concerted effort to do it. You can't accidentally poke your training partner in the eye. So that's a big bonus. I like using these gloves for sparring. I also like them because they put the padding over the front of the knuckles, and a lot of gloves don't. They'll put the padding on the back of the hand. Like, what are we protecting from?
Yeah,
spinning back fists? I mean, that's a kind of a rare strike in fighting anyway, so yeah.
Earlier, my training partners are complaining about their MMA gloves that they found in the storeroom not having the thumb covered, but that my glove does. Led to me thinking, there's not a consensus on how to design MMA gloves yet, not as much as on how to design a boxing glove. Would you agree, Ramsey?
Oh, absolutely. Like in MMA gloves, the UFC gloves have no padding whatsoever over the thumb. The thumb is open, right? There's just a leather strap right there, and the thumb is completely open, and these fingers are exposed, and there's just like a flat wad of padding that sort of runs over the knuckles, but not really. But most of the padding is on the back of the hand. It's almost like a ceremonial cover.
It's like the padding is the same between the top of the hand and the front of the knuckles and by extension the fingers. But they are not supposed to be flat. There should be a natural curvature around this area of the hand, which a lot of typical MMA gloves do not have.
It's a weird design. It's definitely not designed for safety, to be honest. The UFC glove, I think the intention behind that was to try to emulate a bare hand punch as much as possible with a glove on your hand, and to allow as much mobility for grappling and as much freedom for the fingers and the thumbs for grappling as possible.
But your bare hand doesn't stop you from curving it.
Yeah.
Like there's no resistance when you try to make a fist. Maybe just detach the knuckle padding with the top of the hand. I mean, back of the palm padding. Wouldn't it be nice to?
Or maybe let's just be really honest about what combat is and just take the gloves away. And if people break their hands, it's their own fault for recklessly punching. I mean, boxing matches for the longest time were bare knuckle affairs, and the rules were way different. They had unlimited rounds. A round was not timed. A round would end when one fighter got knocked down, and that could be 10 minutes, it could be 10 seconds. It just depended on when a fighter got knocked down. Then they would get a minute break, and then they would restart the action. So if you look at these old catalogs of boxing records from the 1800s, these fights would go on for like 100 rounds, 150 rounds, these obscene numbers of rounds. And if we're trying to interpret this through the lens of modern boxing, we're like, that's like 300 minutes of fighting, that's like 600 minutes. And it's not. More likely than not, a lot of these guys were flopping on their butts to get a break. That's what I think, most likely. Because, the human body cannot take 300 3-minute rounds of punishment. It can't take 100 3-minute rounds of punishment. I mean, the human body isn't really made for 12 rounds of punishment.
I agree. Chael Sonnen thinks that boxers don't feel each other out. They just both agree that they can't do it for 12 rounds.
Oh, yeah.
Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. They burn rounds. Like, case in point, when Conor McGregor boxed Floyd Mayweather, what did Mayweather do for the first few rounds? He burned rounds. And there could have been a few reasons behind that. One, Maybe he was trying to get McGregor to tire himself out. Maybe he was trying to carry him a little bit to make it more of a show. But either way, he burned a few rounds so that the fight would go on longer, so that he would have a greater advantage in the later rounds to finish in a spectacular fashion. People always comment on the long, pregnant pauses in my YouTube videos. I don't think they're that long, to be honest.
I would agree.
I think people are just trained to anticipate jump cuts. I learned there's like a bunch of different iPhone apps that you can get for video editing that automatically cut out silences and replace them with a jump cut. And I thought, man, what a stupid idea for an app. Are you serious? Jump cuts are the most annoying, obnoxious thing in a YouTube video. Like when I see that, I'm like, click away, click away. Like, not to point someone out, but Stephen Thompson, his early YouTube videos, I had a really hard time watching them. I love Stephen Thompson. I think he's a fantastic fighter, and he has some brilliant ideas that he brings to YouTube, and I'm so glad he's on YouTube. But I had a really hard time watching his early videos because he had so many jump cuts. You know, just trying to get the hang of being a YouTuber. And it's hard to watch that stuff. For me, I mean, some people are trained to anticipate that and to respond positively to it. But, man, I'm old school. I can't stand it. Ugh.
Yeah, old movies are much slower paced, I've noticed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, old-time movies could not be made today. Like, if you look at Aikido Kurosawa, for example, his classic samurai films, he had shots that were like a minute and a half long of no action on screen, still frame of a landscape, and then slowly, very slowly, a horse starts approaching over the horizon, and the shot just goes on and on and on. And today people would be like, next, click, next, next.
Western films too.
Yeah. But, man, it's a lost art form, the long shot, if you will. It is a lost art form. There was a film, Russian Ark. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
It's a Russian film. The whole film is done in one single take. And there was a more modern film with Michael Keaton, Birdman, that had the illusion of being done in one single take, although I think they did take some liberties to splice together some scenes. But it has the feeling of being done in one take. But Russian Ark is done all in one take, and it is a incredibly fantastic accomplishment of film that would be nearly impossible to reproduce. I don't know how many takes they did to get this film just right. But is it an exciting movie to watch? Not really. It's exciting if you're a student of film and you're like, how did they do that? How did they make that transition? How much planning and forethought must this have taken? But to the average YouTube viewer, they'd be like, meh, next, whatever.
Maybe hiding some cuts in there.
Because kids these days don't appreciate art. Back in my day, we appreciated art. These are my old man stories. Does this happen in China? Like, this was a thing in America when I was a kid. Like, the old people would criticize the younger generation.
Oh, yeah.
And they would say, back in my day, comic books cost a nickel and soda pop was a dime or something like that. And that's the way we liked it. And life was harder, though. We had to march to school through 3 feet of snow, uphill both ways, without shoes. And it built character.
Oh, that's universal. In China, it's probably worse because the older generations might also bitch about not having as much material resources.
Yeah. Like back in my day, we went through the communist revolution and we all starved. Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, you sound eerily accurate. But
and that's the way we liked it because it built character.
seems universal that in America, I'm just speaking in generalities here, the boomers would criticize millennials and zoomers of being spoiled, having it easy, but they are the ones who are able to afford college, afford housing. And in China too, the people born in the 80s can still at least work hard to get a home, while my generation and the zoomers just won't even think about it.
Yeah.
I'm not that well versed in Chinese economics and politics and whatnot. I've been away for too many years. But,
I tell you what, Xiao, the when I was a kid, when I was a kid stories of my generation are way different than those of my forefathers. For example, mine go something like this. When I was your age, video games were actually difficult. We didn't have these unlimited continues like you kids and these on-screen tutorials. I got to level 6 in Battletoads. You can't even appreciate how impossible that was. Level 6! Most people don't even get past level 3. I got to level 6. You kids have it so easy these days.
Oh man.
Do you even know what Battletoads is? For those of you who don't know what Battletoads is, okay, you think Dark Souls is difficult. You young whippersnappers who don't appreciate difficult video games. Dark Souls is nothing! Nothing compared to Battletoads! Nothing! There, I've said it. I've had my rant. There's my old man moment.
In my opinion, culture peaked in the 70s to the 90s, depending on which country. I have this theory that you can figure out a country's destiny, like how well they are doing just by looking at the cars they make of that era.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we use that metric, America peaked in the 60s and 70s.
Oh,
Germany
yeah.
maybe 70s to
So
the
back in the
90s.
60s and 70s, they had the
Muscle
Ford
cars.
Comet. That was a weird car.
The Ford what?
The Ford Comet. My grandma
What is
had one.
that?
It was this weird car. It was kind of long. It had a really long front and like this swooping, like retro futuristic shape with like these little fins on the back. It's like the way people imagined the future would be back in the 60s.
But it never works out like that.
But it never worked out like that. It was kind of bubbly and just weird shaped. Like by today's standards, I think people are really afraid of making predictions about the future today. But back in the 60s and 70s, I think also science fiction is very telling, as well as the cars that people make. Science fiction is very telling about a culture. Because back in the 60s and 70s, science fiction made these very bold predictions about the future. For example, look at Star Trek. They made the prediction, in the year 1996, there will be this massive eugenics war, which will wipe out a huge percentage of the human population, and there will be superhuman mutants upon the earth, and then World War III will come out several years later, which will result in an atomic apocalypse, which will destroy most of the human population until first contact with the Vulcans happens, and then Starfleet forms.
This storyline is created after the Second World War, right?
Yeah.
Well, it seems that they are just copying history. It's not exactly creative.
Well, they're basically saying, in 40 years, there are going to be catastrophic differences from how it is now. Whereas if you look at modern science fiction, in Hollywood anyway, they try to make their bets as safe as possible. 500 years in the future, we'll have some subtle differences. We'll have slightly better eye gizmos or something like that.
Oh man, but it seems to me that nowadays there actually may be catastrophic failures in the coming decades.
Yeah, but people are afraid to make those predictions in the movies now.
It's too depressing.
Because it is depressing. And maybe that is specifically because people are worried about that stuff actually happening in real life. Like one of my favorite video games of all time, the Fallout series. You ever play Fallout?
No.
Any of the titles?
I know a good bit about it.
Yeah, but the
Seems
basic
like a good
premise
game.
is that in the year 20-something or other, in the not so far distant future, there's an atomic war between the United States and China, and the U.S. gets basically destroyed. We don't know about the rest of the world. We just know about America because it's being destroyed. And some survivors who survived in fallout shelters come out like 200 years later in this ravaged world with mutants and scavengers and all this crazy stuff going on. And it's awesome. But the premise, this war between the US and China, I mean, right now, with the political climate in America, a lot of people seem to be pushing, like they want to see this happen in real life. I'm like, no, you don't want to see this happen in real life. It's a fun video game. It's not a fun reality.
War is not fun.
No, man. And war never changes. That's the tagline of Fallout, by the way. But it's not fun. Yeah, death and destruction, not fun, man. My mom survived World War II, survived Nazi planes dropping bombs on her, and she was very young when that happened, like really too young to remember anything about the war except for the explosions and the sounds of the bomb raid sirens. And it had such a profound effect on her that anytime she heard like a police siren or a fire engine siren, she would just freak out and like revert to, this scared little girl again. And it was alarming for me to see as a child, like to see this happen to my mother, to see her experience PTSD when I didn't even know what PTSD was. And I mean, that's someone who, had a fairly minimal contact with war. I mean, as much as minimal can have on the actual front lines with bombs being dropped on you, but still. And that's to say nothing about someone who's actually involved in fighting a war, being blown up and blowing up other people. So the whole point is war is not fun, guys. You don't want a war, is what I'm saying. But hypothetically speaking, what would happen if war broke out between the US and China right now? I personally think it would spell the destruction of the entire world.
Could be. I honestly don't know. I'm more worried about either one of these countries imploding.
Yeah. Realistically though, we're talking about economic sanctions more than anything. Politicians wagging their fingers at each other. Give in to our demands, or there will be economic consequences.
And it works.
And it works. Yeah. So, whoa, we're getting political here. Let's cut this out and start talking about MMA again, man.
Yeah.
MMA, it's a microcosm of politics. Politics is the legitimate use of violence on an international scale. MMA is the legitimate use of violence within a cage for about 15 minutes.
If that.
If that. So, you gonna fight again, Xiao?
I think so. I wasn't sure I would take this fight.
Yeah?
I had around 3 weeks to prepare.
Have you experienced combat addiction yet?
A little bit.
He got a taste for it, man. I remember after the fight, Xiao came up to me and he was excited. Like, he had a smile on his face. Like, you had a smile on your face. And you were like, well, I'm on a high here. This is amazing. And fighters react very differently to wins. Like, sometimes, like my friend Jeff, he described it this way. After a fight, he's like, when they raise my hand after a win, I feel like a god. And then, as soon as I put it down, it's like, ugh, depression. Just like this severe depression, like it all goes away. Like, come back, awesome feeling. Oh, where'd it go? And so he felt like he had to keep chasing that feeling over and over again with another fight, and then another one, and then another one. So it's like the highest highs and the lowest lows. But for you, it was like, from my perspective, it looked like you were just on a high the whole night, before, during, and after.
Yeah, I wasn't that anxious before. Like I said earlier, it seems to me that the highest high was when I walked out because the crowd were so happy to see me. But when I got my hand raised, I more or less knew I won, so the high wasn't such. And during the fight, during the fight, I was just constantly on a high. I have to be, so much so that it doesn't feel like a high anymore. Just don't think about it. Winning an amateur fight doesn't solve my other problems in life. I'm still very confused about what the meaning of life is. For me, it's driving cars fast and doing psychedelics. So fighting is something new. I might make a habit out of this. Maybe next time I'll get my butt kicked. This time it went
Everybody
about
needs to have that experience. Everybody needs to have the experience of having their butt kicked. Everybody. And you might think, well, what about like a guy like Khabib who's undefeated? You know how many times that guy got his butt kicked leading up to that point in his life? Like no undefeated fighter has not had that experience. I mean, they get their butts kicked so many times in the gym, in training beforehand, that they don't have to in the fight. But whether it's in the gym, in a fight, or just in life, everybody needs to have that experience.
Oh yeah, every first timer who walks into a martial arts gym will have that experience. Sometimes their training partners will be nice enough to do it gently. Some aren't as nice.
Yeah.
Some are strong-willed enough to learn and come back and get their butt kicked again and improve. Some don't have that in them.
Do you remember your first sparring experience?
Oh yeah, it was in the Dutch kickboxing gym, Dynamics MMA in Santa Monica, California.
What was that like?
Weird. It's like I'm playing this video game, but I don't have any moves. And a lot of sparring partners are nice. Some are jerks. And
Like a video game where you want to jump over an obstacle, but your character can't jump. Which begs the question: when was the last time you jumped in real life? I know Xiao jumps fairly often because he's always jumped around in sparring. But for you folks sitting on the couch watching this at home, when was the last time you jumped in real life? If you're complaining about a video game character not being able to jump over an obstacle, ask yourself, when was the last time you jumped in real life?
Well, hey, give them a break. Even if they don't jump regularly, they still can.
Okay, well, most of them can.
So I don't jump often in Grand Theft Auto, but the ability is there. The jump in Grand Theft Auto is fairly useless, though.
Yeah, but there's just something satisfying about being able to jump in a video game versus not being able to jump in a video game. Why is that? It's like...
It makes the space vertical instead of being glued to the floor, I think.
Even if jumping is a worthless skill in the game, it just feels better to be able to do it, to know you have that option.
I think more players are just annoyed by being constrained by artificial barriers that look like any non-disabled person can walk over, but they can't. Their character is supposed to be this badass.
Oh yeah. You know, speaking of video games, I get a lot of questions from gamers who like competitive fighting games, and they play competitively. And they're always asking me to draw comparisons between the strategies you use to win in fighting video games and the strategies you use to win in real life. And from my experience, they are very few and far between. Because, mostly because in a fighting video game, say for example, you can get beat up and knocked out in the first round. You can get beaten within an inch of your life in the second round and then have a comeback and then beat the guy in the third round and you're all good to go. And then you go fight another guy and another guy and another guy. Okay. In real life, every punch you take has a profound psychological effect on you. It has a profound physiological effect on you, and it has a profound emotional effect on you. Every movement that happens in a fight has a very profound effect on you. If you get knocked down, it is demoralizing. Whereas in a fighting video game, you get knocked down, okay, it's this tiny little temporary setback that takes away a chunk of your health bar. And in real life, suddenly you're not the same person after you get up from being knocked down as you were before, even if it does no damage to you.
I want to touch on this a bit. You are talking about games like Street Fighters, Tekken, arcade games, but I think UFC 2 in particular, I don't play 3 and 4 because I don't like them, but 2 has taught me a bit about fighting when I didn't know anything about fighting. It taught me about stamina management. It taught me about magnifying power by chaining together combos. Only later would I learn that it's because it makes the other shots of the combo more difficult to see. It's not because the power magically increases, but that's for later.
Yeah.
It taught me something at least. It taught me about damage accumulation, but also that getting rocked and getting knocked out can happen independent of damage accumulation. It can just be a spur of the moment thing. You can recover from getting rocked. It will have a lasting effect on your health and stamina, but you can overcome that. But in those few moments of getting rocked, especially to the body, you almost lose the ability to breathe and move.
Yeah.
And that can be the end of a fight very quickly.
In that way, yeah, the UFC games do a pretty good job of approximating how damage can happen in a fight. Not how damage always does happen in a fight, but much better than, the simple health bar you generally get in a Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter type of game. I have to say, I haven't really kept up with the modern UFC video game series because it frustrates me to death because I suck at those games. And I'm like, I can't submit anybody in those dumb games. I get the guy in the rear naked choke, and you got to play like this mini game to toggle the controllers around. I'm like, this is so much easier in real life than it is in the game. It's supposed to be the other way around.
I won't comment on the ground aspects because I'm a terrible grappler, but I would like to criticize those games a bit too. I think playing UFC 2 too much has hampered my development as a striker because it made me not understand the importance of taking angles. It's still fundamentally a side-scrolling fighting game, despite all of its advanced
mechanics. Right, they are basically 2D fighting games that look like 3D ones.
So for a long time I only had in and out linear karate-ish movement, but a Ramsey here made me see the light of cutting angles.
Now, what did we do today in the boxing class? That's all we did.
Cut
Angles. Like
about every time. 8
different ways to cut angles when the guy moves forward. And 2 different ways to get the guy to move forward. Right? And, this is all review. It's not new information, but it is so important. Think about it like you're playing Street Fighter. Somebody throws a fireball at you. It's a 2D game, so what do? You have to jump over it or block it and take some of the damage. And those are your 2 options. And neither of them are really good options, to be honest.
Just move out of the way of the fireball.
Yeah, in real life, if there was a slow-moving fireball coming toward you, you could simply move to the side, cut an angle, and not take any damage and not set yourself up for a counter. I think this is one of the reasons that the gaming purists hated Mortal Kombat 5, because it was the first 3D Mortal Kombat game where you could step out of the way of the slow-moving fireballs coming toward you in a 3D space. And it just kind of rendered the fireball attacks fairly useless, to be honest.
Ironically, the Super Arcade series that is Yakuza, which features a lot of fighting, taught me way more about cutting angles than UFC games ever did. Shame on EA Sports.
I had a student when I first got here to Shanghai, when I opened up my first gym, this dude from Germany, Klaus. He worked for a video game company, the company that designed... which UFC game came out in 2009?
Ooh.
Whichever one came out around that time.
Might have been not EA Sports.
Yeah, he was one of the graphic designers for that game. And when I asked him, why are you interested in an MMA class? And he said, well, I designed some of the graphics for the UFC game, and I saw these moves, and I was like, I want to learn how to do this stuff. And he actually picked up a lot of movements from this game that he was working on. Not that he became a stellar fighter because of that, but it pushed him in the right direction.
It's a start.
Yeah, to pursue further knowledge, if you will. So one thing video games do a good job of is getting people interested in martial arts, I think.
Movies too.
Bruce
Lee created so many martial artists.
Yes. You're looking at one right here. Probably one right there too. It's true, man. It's true. I mean, how many martial artists would there be on Earth today if it were not for Bruce Lee? Do you know that
A third.
one of my favorite Joe Rogan quotes of all time, and I love that he said this in such a deadpan, serious way. There are more people on Earth today that can kick other people in the face than ever before in the history of the world.
He's right, though.
He's right. But that probably would not be the case if it weren't for Bruce Lee.
Made face kicking cool.
Yeah, he made face kicking cool. I mean, there are a lot of cultures out there where face kicking was strongly discouraged. I mean, in Thailand, for example. Yeah, in a great twist of irony, even though head kicking is a big part of Muay Thai, in the Thai culture, touching people with your feet in general it's a major social faux pas. Touching someone with the sole of the feet, even more. Touching someone in the face with your feet, this is like your sacred place, basically. And the sole of the foot, that's the part that touches the dirt. And so like a teep to the head, ooh, man, that's adding insult to injury.
But isn't even teeping the body considered disrespectful?
To a certain extent. If you watch like Muay Thai fights in Thailand, they tend to start out slow, at like a slow sparring pace. And there are a couple of reasons for this. The first round, that's when everybody's placing their bets. Mm-hmm. And so the fighters are encouraged to keep it at a slow pace, right? Not kill each other in the first round so that people have time to place their bets and, you know, the bookies can get their action on the side, right? But it's also because Thai culture has this uber politeness. There's this cultural politeness that. Have you been to Thailand?
Yes, when I was very young. I don't remember much.
Okay, well, I've been there as a tourist, as an adult, and you know traveled several parts of Thailand and so on, and it's a fascinating place, and I think a lot of tourists just fall in love with Thailand because the people are so nice to the tourists, generally speaking, especially Western tourists. And a big part of the Thai culture is just be nice to other people, be polite to other people. And so it's almost like a you go first type of mentality. And so when two people are fighting, it's like in round one, it's like, okay, you go first, you make that first offensive move.
After you, sir.
So I'm not gonna be the rude one, right? But I notice almost always the first fighter to throw the teep, that's almost like the signal, like now it's real. Now we're not going like the light sparring pace. Now we're gonna pick up the action. Like as soon as that first teep lands, it's like okay, now we're fighting for real.
It's so weird to me that Thailand, a country that lives and dies by kickboxing, doesn't like the teep. How does that even work? Speaking of straight kicks, teeps, front kicks, side kicks, you name it. I've had this. So even the most stupid boxing coach knows that straight punches are more important than looping punches, be it a hook or an uppercut. But how is it that Muay Thai coaches and kickboxing coaches, it seems that the majority of them seem to overemphasize the round kick and not place enough emphasis on the straight kicks?
A lot of that has to do with the way they're taught. Like, where did you learn Muay Thai?
Different places, Dynamics MMA in Santa Monica. Like I was there for.
Where were the coaches from?
My second gym, Legends MMA, is a fairly new gym, and
what country were the coaches from?
America.
Okay, American Muay Thai coaches are way different than Thai Muay Thai coaches, generally speaking. Way different. Like the way they teach, the way they train, the way they spar, what they emphasize. It's way different. And there are all kinds of different types of Thai trainers as well. I'm not going to put them all in one bag. Like there are a lot of lazy Thai trainers out there who are just terrible coaches. Great fighters, terrible coaches. But and a lot of guys, they'll want to go to a Muay Thai camp in Thailand. They get really excited about this trip. They go there, and then their trainer just has them kick a bag for 3 months. Like do 5 billion round kicks, and we'll see what's what. Now I'm going to go pay attention to my actual fighters that I care about, that actually make money for this gym. Unlike you, go kick the bag, right? And they have that type of experience. So there are radically divergent experiences you'll have in Thailand, but if you have a good Thai coach, for example, I trained with my coach Rock Chanan Sinsub, who was a very, very good Muay Thai coach. And this is a guy who really paid attention to the students and seemed to actually care that they developed fighting skills and knew how to fight, and just really good, especially at teaching clinch fighting. And one thing I noticed when I trained in America is clinch fighting was probably the least emphasized aspect in Muay Thai gyms there. Whereas with Rock, it was like his number one thing. Like we would warm up with at least 10 minutes of clinch sparring, at least. And then he would laugh and say, in Thailand, children do this for 30 minutes every day as a warm-up. And he always had a smile on his face. A super cheery, positive guy. But yeah, the American version of Muay Thai, again, most of the time they'll scrap like all the cultural artifacts like the Y Crew Rum Y, the Thai dance,
epic dance
the
battle.
epic dance battle before the fight. Yes, exactly. And a lot of the times it's because they don't know it. Generally, what Americans do, they teach what they know. When they try to recreate a cultural artifact in the form of a martial art from another country, they teach what they were taught. So, for example, if you have a guy who goes to Thailand, goes to a Muay Thai camp, he's like, I want to have this experience of training in Thailand so people know I'm a legit coach when I go back to America. And he has one of those coaches that says, do the round kick 5 billion times on the bag, and maybe we'll do some pad work later. Maybe. And maybe we'll spar, and maybe we'll find you a fight that I'll make some money off of in 3 months' time. And then they have that experience and they go back to America and they're like, well, I'll teach what I was taught. All right, everybody, let's spam round kicks all day long. So, with a very good Muay Thai coach who cares about your progress, right? They'll teach you all kinds of things. Like Rock, he was super versatile with his movement vocabulary. And with this,
that's a good kickboxer should be.
Yes, and even with a single move like the round kick, there was so much diversity in applications of that one move. Like it wasn't just like one thing you spam over and over again. There are many, many ways to use that one move. And very good, extremely good Muay Thai fighters are, man, what's his name? Kamofan Kiat Songrit, for example, that dude who fought Rick Rufus, for example, in that famous fight. Before that fight, if you watch his old tapes, it's tempting to say he wasn't very fancy in his fighting. He was very simple. What did he do? He did things like a jab and a leg kick, or a lead hook and a leg kick. And, just really simple combinations like that. Nothing that looked very fancy, but he used them in such a dynamic way that he won so many fights because of his understanding of these simple techniques and how he was able to dynamically apply them in many different situations. But that's a very different thing than just telling somebody, go kick the bag 1,000,000 times.
Fear the man who practiced one kick 10,000 times or however many times.
Yeah.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah, and I think
there's a way to practicing too.
I think American Muay Thai coaches are afraid of deviating from the norm of what they were taught out of fear of being told that's not real Muay Thai.
Whatever.
Even if it's better and more effective, they're afraid of being told that's not real Muay Thai. But what is real Muay Thai? I mean, today, Muay Thai fighters cross-train in boxing. 40 years ago, that wasn't the case. Like at all. And Muay Thai fights looked way different 40 years ago. I mean, you can see this. Like, look up, like, you can see old black and white videos of Muay Thai fights in Thailand from the 1960s. And they're super interesting. It's a fascinating cultural artifact, but they don't look like modern Muay Thai fights, specifically because the boxing isn't there. The strategies are very different. The strategies are very much built up around kicking and clinch fighting, and not so much around the boxing. And say when Ramon Dekkers went to Thailand and essentially combined boxing and kickboxing and Muay Thai together, I think that was the revelatory moment. That was the eye-opening moment that the Thais kind of needed to push them to say, hey, think outside the box, try some new things.
Hey, at least the Thais didn't straight up ban punch in the face like karate and taekwondo. Good on them. And I say this.
That's such a weird rule.
I say this with great pain because I admire those two styles so much.
Yeah.
But I have to do all the work myself and with the help of innovative coaches like you to figure out how they work in real combat.
Yeah. I mean, I laugh at that, and a lot of people out there on the internet who do not have experience in Taekwondo, don't have experience in karate, they'll often give me a hard time saying, why do you hate karate so much? Why do you hate Taekwondo so much? Even though I don't say anything hateful about those styles, not understanding that I spent decades of my life training in these styles, that I hold ranks in these styles, that I hold black belts in these styles, that I know more about karate and Taekwondo than you do. You whiners? Just saying.
Well, you do use it in real combat.
And that I use it in real fights. And that I have done more for karate and Taekwondo than all you keyboard warriors combined.
Someone like Stephen Thompson and Liu Xiao who identify with the karate style, they still had to learn the other aspects of MMA to be great like they are.
It's aggravating talking to these folks, though. Not Stephen Thompson. He's an awesome guy. But talking to the folks online who think that all you need to do is show up to a McDojo and, you know, show up until they give you the black belt and do all the forms, and then suddenly, because you have the right label, you have the karate patch or whatever, that you're qualified to fight. And that's simply not the case. I made a video a while back where I said, if you want to successfully use your karate in mixed martial arts, Muay Thai or kickboxing, you need to learn how to box. And about half of the people who watched that received it pretty well and said that seems like a pretty good idea. After all, in our karate style, we don't actually punch each other in the face, and that's a big missing component here. It's kind of a no-brainer. Duh. I wonder why I didn't think about that before. And the other half were like, how dare you disrespect karate and not really acknowledge that it's a complete system in every single way, shape, and form, and everybody with a black belt is a certified killer forever and ever. Amen. Guys, it is objectively better to be better at fighting than to be worse at fighting. It is objectively better to be stronger than it is to be weaker. It is objectively better to know more than it is to know less. That is all. And if you get mad about that, then you're objectively stupid. That's all I'm saying.
But what good is an art or style if it doesn't do what it's intended for?
You know what, though, Xiao? Most martial artists on planet Earth today, in spite of the fact that there are more people who can kick people in the face today than at any other time, according to Joe Rogan, which is probably true, most martial artists suck at their martial art. Regardless of the style. Name a martial art. Name any martial art. Any martial art.
Even in MMA.
Yes, MMA.
We don't do enough MMA.
Most people who go to MMA gyms suck at MMA. I'm not talking about most professional MMA fighters in the UFC, but most people who train in MMA, who go to an MMA class, suck at MMA. They're not particularly athletic. They have a long way to go, and they are not willing to sacrifice everything it takes to become a truly great fighter. That's most people, and that's okay. Name another martial art or combat sport.
Boxing.
Boxing. Most people who take boxing classes suck at boxing. That doesn't mean boxing isn't good. That's just most people suck. In general, period. Most people suck. And most people who suck also suck at boxing. Why? Because they haven't put in the work, they haven't put in the effort, they haven't developed the athleticism, and they're not willing to put in the sacrifice to become a great boxer. Name another martial art.
Freaking Aikido.
Aikido. Most Aikidokas suck at Aikido. And I'm not saying Aikido sucks, it's just most of them suck at Aikido. I had a really interesting discussion with Stefan afterward. He's that big Serbian dude who we train with, right? And he has a background in Aikido, and he's showing me some Aikido moves, and he did something very differently than most other Aikidokas that I've trained with. I've trained with a lot of Aikido practitioners, and I always pick their brains about technique. But instead of grabbing my wrist to set up a wrist lock, he grabbed my hand, and he dug his thumb into my hand in this very specific way, and I realized that is giving him a lot more control over my wrist than actually controlling the wrist itself. And so I picked his brain about it, and I'm like, I want to learn this. This is so fascinating. This minor difference between holding here and holding here. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's the difference between night and day as far as setting up wrist locks and all these movements. But again, most Aikido practitioners suck at Aikido. And those who are good at Aikido tend to share a few common traits. They're very athletic, they're very strong, they're generally a lot bigger and stronger than the people they're doing Aikido on, and they generally also know how to fight. They know other fighting styles. They've been in fights before. And people don't like hearing this. They don't like hearing this, but it's true of every martial art. Name another style.
Sword fighting.
Sword fighting. Most people who practice sword fighting suck at sword fighting. Now, I was a member of, and I'm one of those people. I was a member of my college fencing team, and I was probably the worst guy on the fencing team. And people think sword fighting is easy, so I'm probably way, way better at sword fighting than the average person who's never actually picked up a sword and fenced before. But I'm on the like way low end of actual fencers. Like if you are a competent fencer, you would beat me in fencing. But if you don't know anything about fencing, I'd kick your butt all over the place. So, yeah, but again, most people who fence, who practice sword fighting, HEMA, historical European martial arts, etc., they suck at that thing. Why? Because they're average people. And average people develop average skills. They put in average effort and they get average results. Let's do this one more time. Let's offend some more people on the internet. Name another martial art.
Karate.
Karate. Most karatekas suck at karate. And once again, that is not because karate sucks. It's because they are average people putting in average effort, getting average results. Do you see where I'm going here?
Didn't you say that I would be a lot better at karate than most karatekas?
Yes.
Even if I have no formal training, I tried out their stuff in real combat.
Xiao has no formal training in karate.
Or taekwondo.
And he is better at karate and taekwondo than many black belts that I know.
I was a soccer player, so I have an intimate relationship with my feet. And when I took up combat sports, I decided I like kicking people.
There are so many karate and taekwondo black belts I know who, against that dude you fought on Saturday,
would fold.
Would have folded after he came out with that first jab. That was a good jab he came out with. And you didn't fold, you moved around it, you compensated, you fired back. You did that thing everybody thinks they're gonna do, who hasn't really trained, because the average guy overestimates his fighting abilities substantially. But you went out there and did it. Why? Because you got out there and you trained first. You did it the right way.
I had to put in a lot of work in my boxing, and I still suck at boxing.
Yeah.
Even with kicking, in the beginning, I thought just by virtue of being a soccer player, I would kick well, and I could barely kick at torso level. And when I did manage to kick the heavy bag in the right place, I hurt my leg. I can't even... Forget about hurting the opponent. I can't even kick without hurting my damn self. That was humbling.
Indeed, man. We were talking the other day and you said something along the lines of, I'm a lazy guy.
Yeah, I kind of am.
And now, if Xiao, who is a self-proclaimed lazy guy, is already better than a huge percentage of karate and taekwondo black belts that I personally know. And I've trained with a lot of them, mind you. Not just a tiny little sample size of folks out there, but a lot of them, okay? And he's a self-proclaimed lazy guy. I would strongly suggest, if you have not competed yourself, check yourself. If you think you're good at your martial art, if you think you are good at karate or good at taekwondo or good at Wing Chun or good at Aikido or good at any of these things, check yourself. The mirror is hard to look into. It truly is. But, man.
When we talk about karate, it could be the sport. There are many variations of, like Kyokushin, and there are other karate point fighting sports that don't allow leg kicks. Karate and Taekwondo, they could be sports, they could be a concept, they could be the tradition, the art. But something like Wing Chun, it's just a concept.
Yeah. And a lot of people are going to get mad because they identify with that label. They identify with the Wing Chun label. Etymology lesson, folks. Identify comes from two Latin words. Idem, which means the same, and ficare, which means to make. Literally means to make yourself the same as something else. So if I say, I identify with Wing Chun, that means Wing Chun and I are the same thing. I was doing a podcast earlier today with a friend who said, he gave this analogy. He said, imagine for a minute you have a car, okay? And you can say, this is my car. And most people will be like, okay, I get it, it's your car. But if you say, I am the car, people look at you like you're a crazy person, because you basically are, because you're identifying with this inanimate object, right? And that's basically what happens when somebody says, I am a Wing Chun practitioner, I am a karateka, I am a Taekwondo practitioner, I am a Jiu Jitsu artist, whatever you want to call yourself. And I guess, yeah, you are, but you're also not, because you're identifying with the label.
To be a good driver, you have to become at one with the car, but you are not the car.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of an amateur racing driver, so I've had some experience, but what you said about identifying with a martial arts style, it resonated with me, because in the beginning I identified with being a good kicker. Mm-hmm. I thought I would try to do well in fighting to win in sparring or defeat the opponent by kicking. And over time I realized that my boxing was so lacking. And after I put in a substantial amount of work in boxing, I start to identify with my boxing. I put in all this effort to learn this boxing, and even if I'm still not particularly good at it, I do identify with it. Yeah. I'm proud of the ways I've come in boxing, insufficient as it may be.
Indeed. So it's probably more important to identify with your actual experiences than with more abstract ideas.
Maybe I should do that with grappling next. Because before I always identified as a striker, and I would study grappling to avoid getting messed up by grapplers. But I never got very far in grappling. Maybe there's a fundamental flaw in my mindset.
Yeah, you should. I mean, we got an excellent jiu-jitsu class here at the gym. Take advantage of it, man. Take advantage. So we were talking before about, you were asking me about that Bruce Lee quote about pointing his finger
to the moon.
To the moon. And you'll find this quote in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I can't even pronounce that today. But you'll also find it in the movie Enter the Dragon, where he's teaching his young disciple and slaps him upside the head a few times. He's like, no, do not focus on the finger, or you will miss all that heavenly glory, because he's pointing up at the moon, right? But when people fixate on styles, on the label, they identify with the style, and they get mad when they hear somebody like me say that most martial artists are terrible at their martial art, because that's how humans are. They're fixating on the finger. The finger is, let's call the finger like karate or taekwondo or Krav Maga or whatever your style is called, right? And they're looking at the finger instead of what the finger is pointing at. right?
Yes.
What is the style pointing at? What does karate point you toward? It points you toward
Managing distance.
yeah, managing distance.
Maximizing the power of your single strikes.
Yes. It points you toward all these very positive attributes that you can develop. But people get so fixated on that finger, like, ooh, what a beautiful finger, look at that karate, I identify with that, instead of looking in the direction it's pointing.
I think this is especially applicable to Wing Chun. The other day we were talking about how some people complain Wing Chun died, but it never did because straight punches never died, hand trapping, hand fighting never died, kicking, using straight kicks on the legs, on the kneecaps never died.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the concept of moving off the center line never died.
There is nothing new under the sun. I mean, people want to preserve these historical artifact martial arts, if you will, like Wing Chun, and they don't want them to die, right? And I understand that. I understand that from a almost like an archaeological perspective, if you will. But these ideas did not start with Wing Chun, right? The ideas expressed in karate did not start with karate. They weren't original. The ideas of boxing, right, did not originate with boxing. These are as old as humans. As long as there have been human civilizations, there have been methods of fighting. Did I tell you about the time where I believed that I invented my own move? This has actually happened multiple times. It's happened multiple times, but when I was in my 20s, I independently figured out the 3/4 Nelson. It's a wrestling technique. You know, if somebody reaches for the underhook, you counter with a whizzer, you get a collar tie, you move it over to the back of the head, you join your hands, you hold the elbows in really tight, and you have this nice position to throw and control and submit somebody.
It's hard to figure out.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out, but I figured it out independently. Nobody taught me the 3/4 Nelson. I figured it out by myself. And I called it the figure 4 clinch. Because again, I was like, well, I need a name for this cool move I made up. And I patted myself on the back. Good job, Ramsey, for inventing this cool new move that nobody has ever thought of before. And then I'm on the internet one day looking up some pictures of catch wrestlers from like the 1930s.
Moment of truth.
Yeah, and I see this guy doing my move, and it has a name, and it's the 3/4 Nelson, and I'm like,
he time traveled and stole my move.
Exactly. Carl Gotch time traveled and stole my move.
That's not
That
fair.
little jerk. Yeah. But yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Like if you watch, everybody was like 12 years ago getting really excited about the deep half guard in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Because in 1993, nobody was doing the deep half guard in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? However, in the early 1900s, Jigoro Kano and his students, Mifune, for example, you can see videos of this on YouTube, they were doing deep half guard.
Yeah, judo was a lot about ground fighting
Yeah.
before it got watered down.
Yeah.
And we're pissing off so many people tonight. I love it.
I hope so. But anger solicits change, often. Because people often, they hear an uncomfortable truth like, you're not as good at your martial art as you think you are. And they're like, I'll show you. And so what do? They go out and they start training a little harder, and then they have an epiphany. He's actually right, I won't admit it, but getting out there and training made me better at my martial art than I previously was.
That's the experience you had as a Taekwondo artist.
Yeah? Oh man, I had this experience a number of times, but I went straight from amateur Taekwondo and amateur karate competition to professional kickboxing. I never had an amateur kickboxing career. I just went straight from amateur traditional martial arts competition to professional kickboxing. And I thought, it's basically the same thing. And mechanically, sure, you throw punches and kicks in both things, but it's not the same thing at all. Like, at all. For example, just the simple fact that you can be punched in the face changes the dynamic to such an alarming degree, that you would never even consider unless you've been punched in the face before. And how many people are there out in the world today who have never been punched in the face, ever?
A lot.
There are a lot of them. I would, to amend what Joe Rogan said about more people on the earth kicking people in the face or being able to kick people in the face, I would venture to say there are more people on earth today who have never been punched in the face than ever before in human history.
Oh, certainly possible. Very likely.
I think it's absolutely true. I mean, there are more people on earth today, for example, than ever before in human history. In the next 10 years, we might have 9 billion people on this planet in a few years, man. So percentage-wise, yeah. I think it's absolutely true. There are probably more people on earth today who've never been punched in the face.
Well, fist fighting in general is less acceptable in schools nowadays. It's punished with stiffer criminal sentencing in a lot of countries. Certainly here in China and in America.
Yeah.
Is masculine culture as a whole is on the decline.
Yeah, fighting is generally punished much more severely now than it was before. Like, I remember when I first got to China, people would fight in the street more. And they were stupid street fights, but they would fight in the street. They'd hit each other a little bit. They'd yell some angry words. And then eventually they would break it up and nothing more would come of it. And now there's a lot more police involvement. There's a lot more, you pay a fine now. There's a lot more, there's a legal consequence now.
Yes, there is.
Whereas before, the police would kind of look the other way, like, you settle this among yourselves.
Seems that there's even more legal consequence in the States.
Yeah.
It's supposedly freer country, which it is freer in a lot of ways. I'm certainly not a China shill, but it is what it is, man.
Yeah, but there's so much misunderstanding about what China actually is today from folks in the West. Like, I get so many crazy comments on YouTube. Like, as soon as they hear it's Ramsey Dewey in Shanghai, China, they're like, oh, China! Let me tell you all about China, Mr. Ramsey Dewey.
Eat cats and dogs!
Even though I've never been to China and I don't know anything about it, and I've never actually studied it, and I only know what I've heard on the news from sensationalist reporters trying to push a very specific agenda, let me tell you all about the country you've lived in for the last 12 years. Yeah.
Well, there's this extreme, let's say, disgust of China among some Americans, but there's also extreme disgust without the knowledge to back it up.
Yeah.
But there's also this extreme worship of an idea without knowledge to back it up. For example, I heard that some leftist kids in the States claim to be Maoists.
Oh,
but they have no knowledge of the atrocities that Mao has committed. Oh my God, saying this in China feels weird. I guess I'm lucky this is going on YouTube.
Oh man, Xiao, are you worried about disappearing?
Somewhat.
We can edit that part out if you want.
Let's deliberate on this afterwards.
Here's a question for you though, like, people are always writing in the comments like, Ramsey, I know that you can't talk about this, and then they'll write something that I don't even care about, like some random thing about China that isn't even true. I know you can't talk about this because the Chinese government will make you disappear. I'm like, I don't talk about that because I don't care, right? Not because I feel like some compulsion, like Big Brother breathing down my neck, like, don't you dare talk about such and such a thing.
State surveillance, overreaching as it is, it's not all-encompassing. I'm much more worried about the traffic police catching on to me running red lights every day on my scooter than what we're doing here.
Yeah, they're cracking down on scooter laws a lot. Like, 12 years ago, you could ride almost any vehicle in the scooter lane, as long as it remotely resembled a bike, a motorcycle, a scooter, what do you call those things? A four-wheeler, a go-kart, whatever. You could, there were some weird vehicles in the scooter lane. And then they cracked down a few years back. Yeah, man, I saw some strange, unidentified objects rolling around.
Unidentified driving objects.
Yes.
UDO.
Yes. But yeah, a few years back, they passed a new law where your scooter has to meet certain specifications. It has to get a license plate. And it's free. You just go down to the Department of, what is it? Basically the police station, and they give you a license plate for your scooter so they can keep track of it. Make sure it's all copacetic and you're not driving some souped up super vehicle on the road that is a potential danger to pedestrians, in theory anyway. But a recent law they passed last month, you now have to wear a helmet if you drive a scooter.
I think I'm getting cauliflower ear on my right ear. It hurts to wear the helmet.
Yeah? Oh, man. Well, don't let the police catch you without a helmet. They're giving out some finger waggings, and I think there might be like a fine. I don't know how much it is, like 50 kwai, 100 kwai. Depends
So
on...
the helmet protects me from the rain. The weather reports have been less than trustworthy lately, so I will wear it for now.
But yeah, it's now required by law. You must wear a helmet while driving on the streets of Shanghai. Yeah, this is the type of oppression we live under in China. Like, everyone's always asked me, like, Ramsey, what's the government oppression like over there in China for you? Like, well, I have to wear a helmet now when I drive my scooter on the road.
Well, hey, at least in China, the police wouldn't chase me with a helicopter involved if I run the red light, which American police will. In America, I will only run from the police on a mountain road. In the video game, of course.
I told you this story before about a run in the head with the traffic cops in Shanghai. So this is after they passed the license plate law, where your scooter has to have a license plate now, right? And my scooter was not licensed, and I didn't know about the law yet. Now, in America, ignorance of the law is not an acceptable excuse. You will still suffer the consequences of the law, even if you don't know about it. Now, so I pull up to the stop, and I didn't recognize the officer, and he's trying to get my attention. I don't hear him because I've got a helmet on, and the light changes green, and I start driving away, and he grabs the back of my scooter. I'm like, holy crap, I'm being carjacked. And so I ramp up the accelerator to maximum, and he's like, stop, and he jumps out in front. I'm like, holy crap, it's a cop. Am I going to jail? Are they going to shoot me? They don't carry guns. In China, the cops don't carry guns here. But in America, if this happened in America, this would be resisting arrest. I would be on the ground being beaten, possibly shot or tased or something along those lines.
Very likely.
Yeah.
American police do have a discretion in how they enforce the law too. Maybe more so than Chinese police, but they have a culture of violence.
Yeah.
Just to say shame on America, man.
But what ended up happening before we got into shame on America too much and offend all my American viewers, like 30% of my YouTube audience. So this cop jumps out in front. He's like, halt, young man, you have no license plate on your scooter. I'm like, really? I need one of those? And he's like, yes, it is now the law. It's been in effect for several weeks now. And all you need to do is go. And he's speaking in English to me. Like, this would never happen in America. Imagine you're a foreigner, for example. If you're a Chinese person and you go to America and you are breaking a traffic law and you don't speak English, you will not get this type of treatment, right? A cop will not be like, oh, let's find a Chinese-speaking officer to communicate with this unfortunate gentleman here who is unaware of our customs and our ways. That would never happen. So he's speaking in perfect English, explaining the situation, like, let me draw you out a map to the police station so that you can go and get this license plate. It's free. And say hi to Nancy down at the police station. I'm just making up stuff here at this point, but he was very friendly.
He probably practiced that routine in preparation for enforcing the license plate laws.
Probably, but he was super friendly. He was, showed me an incredible amount of respect. And I was like, thank you, sir. I called him sir, not because I felt fear. Like, when I speak to American police officers, when they pull you over, like, I pulled you over. And they're like, no sir. And you call them yes sir, no sir in America out of fear that they will retaliate in a negative way. In China, I called this man sir because he earned my respect, because he showed me respect. So, radically different experiences.
It seems to me that nowadays China and America are both highly authoritarian countries, but in different ways.
Yeah.
And in some ways, America really is more authoritarian than China.
In a lot of
Not
ways,
just with
yeah.
the police issue.
In a lot of ways. Like, China exercised its authority, like during the COVID crisis, back between January and April of 2020. China did something that America was not willing or able to do at that time, which was shut down everything, shut down the borders, shut down travel between cities, shut down every business, etc. for a meaningful amount of time until the virus was under control. In America, they weren't willing to do that until the virus got radically out of control, and then all of a sudden Americans are now losing their civil liberties, essentially. And so many of my friends, I don't know about all over America, but many of my friends in many cities across America are living under curfews, for example. Like you have to, and they're facing potential jail time if they don't respect these new laws, which are technically unconstitutional. So I mean, I don't even know how to go into all of the details about this, but in the land of apple pie and freedom, it's not all apple pie and freedom from what I'm hearing in many, many parts of America these days.
I don't want to say that what China did regarding COVID was right or moral or wise, but China did reopen up sooner later on, and that should count for something. Many parts of the US are still locked down to differing degrees as of right now.
Yeah, to this day, every time I put a YouTube video where I show training, I get a comment like, "Oh man, I still can't train. We're still on lockdown." I'm like, still? What is it like? It's like more than a year later. Like 15 months later after the fact, they're still on lockdown in many places in the U.S. People have lost their freedoms in the U.S. and it's
their livelihoods,
their jobs, their gyms are being shut down. A number of friends of mine have lost their gyms and their businesses because of this. And I'm sure many of the folks watching this are in the same boat. And people are looking for a scapegoat. They're looking for someone to blame. And I think this is why a lot of Americans right now are angry at China, and they want to see some sort of comeuppance, because they're like, that's where the virus started, and therefore let's project all the anger over there, even though that doesn't help. Like, scapegoats don't actually help. And yet it's one of the first things we're conditioned as human beings to want.
Think of it this way. Our gym alone has hosted 2 amateur fight cards since COVID. And in America, you can train in many regions still.
Yeah, that's true. Sad, man. I mean, a lot of people have died over in the U.S., like a lot of them. Like this number that I don't think anybody expected, especially like even when the virus became widespread, even when it became a pandemic, I don't think anybody expected numbers like that. We're kind of going down a gloom and doom path. All right.
Speaking of amateur fight cards, let's talk about TJ's matchmaking a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's worth talking about.
So TJ is the owner of this gym, the EFL gym. By the way, we changed the name. It's no longer the UFL gym. It is the EFL gym, the Extreme Fight Club, because we're extreme now.
Yeah!
Extreme.
The UFC got mad at us.
The UFC got extremely mad because we used the initial U and F, but not C, with the same font. But we're extreme now.
Maybe that was not wise to begin with.
Nah. But Man, China did that all the time. I mean, UFC, the original copyright of UFC is actually owned by the United Fruit Company. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
They make delicious mango juice, by the way. Shout out to the UFC Juice Company.
Might have to try it out.
Yeah, they make great mango juice, great pineapple juice too. But they predate the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
So what, the UFC bought them out?
I don't know, because the United Fruit Company, I think, I don't know where they're based, but it's not an American company. So I don't know if international law has any effect in this. So probably not.
It's not like the UFC can force us to change our name, but we do have fighters currently fighting for UFC.
Yeah, the way TJ explained it to me, he said, I want to have a good relationship with the UFC Performance Institute here in Shanghai. Therefore, I'm going to change the name and get it, registered and everything, copacetic and legal with the red stamp of approval on it, and so on. So we're extreme now.
Extreme. Well, let's talk about TJ's ability to put on these spectacular shows first. As far as amateur fight cards go, this is about as good as it gets. I'm genuinely surprised because I've watched one amateur kickboxing event in the States, and it's nothing as spectacular as this.
I've seen professional fight shows worse than this, man. Like, some professional fight shows are terrible. But this was a really well organized one, and a big part of it is the Punch Cage Club, because they first of all, they offer a really good venue. I feel like I'm giving a sponsorship shout out to Punch Cage, even though I'm totally not. But Punch Cage, if you want to sponsor my YouTube channel, let me know. Hint, hint. But yeah, they have a really good venue. It's a nightclub, but they have a permanent fight cage in the middle, and they host various exhibitions of MMA, grappling, boxing, medieval sword fighting, you name it. If there's a type of fight exhibition that you want to put on, they're willing to host it. So that's a really fascinating business model for a nightclub. And so yeah, TJ's he partnered with them, and instead of just having our yearly like every year at this gym, we put on a fight show just to give the students opportunities to compete in front of a crowd. And we used to do it here at the gym, but then the Punch Cage Club opened and we started doing it there, which is so much
more rad there.
It's so much more rad because you got the lights and the ring girls and the whole spectacle, and it feels like, whoa, this is legit now because it's in a cage. It's not just at my gym in front of the guys I already know. They're all the intangibles that fighters need to experience before they go pro. And so, it's awesome that you were able to have that experience.
I am so thankful I got to fight in a spectacular event like this for my first amateur fight. And the event sold plenty of tickets too, so it pays for itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like I contributed something to the fans. They were entertained by me and Mr. Who's performance.
Yeah, and that was a good matchup. Like you mentioned about TJ's matchmaking ability.
Yeah, every match was closely fought.
That makes or breaks a fight. It really does. So you can have a fantastic fighter and an okay fighter, and you put them in a fight together, and it's going to be a bad fight. Because that fantastic fighter is going to squish the okay fighter pretty quickly. And everybody already knows what's going to happen. It's not compelling, it's not interesting, and there's no story there, right? But if you take two guys, even if they suck at fighting, but they're evenly matched, right? And they suck at fighting, but they have a willingness to persist. They have a little bit of heart to them. You put them together, and then you've got a good fight on your hands.
Also, everyone's got to improve somehow, even the ones that are not so good.
Yes, I mean that's how you get good. That's how you get good, man. Because what happens, like, I had a fight like 12 years ago for Martial Combat before they became 1FC, and it was a terrible fight. They matched me up with Leandro Issa, who was just way, way above my skill level at the time. I mean, we're talking third degree Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt world champion, He was like the poster boy of martial combat at the time.
Not to mention, it's a terrible matchup in weight.
Yes, and I had to cut 30 pounds in less than 24 hours, which almost killed me. And even without that weight cut, though, even if I went into that fight fresh, it was a stupid matchup. I mean, have you ever just like rolled with a 3rd degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu? Have you rolled with Professor Guy? He's a 2nd degree black belt.
No, I haven't, but I have rolled with...
If you have the chance to roll with him sometime. And he has the ability to just play with people.
Yeah, that's my experience with
Like, you can
other
do whatever
black
you
belts.
want. You can do whatever you want, and at your level, he would just gently play with you like a cat playing with a ball of yarn, and do whatever he wants, however he wants,
It's
whenever he
humbling.
wants. And it's
Very
humbling.
humbling.
Yeah. Now, imagine a guy who's even better than that. Like a guy who's on the world champion level. And you have to fight him. Not gently spar with him, but you have to fight him.
Ooh.
And you can call the shots and know exactly how and when and why you're going to lose. He's going to take you down, he's going to pass your guard, he's going to get in a dominant position, and he's going to submit you. And that's exactly what happened in my fight. Like, I knew how I was going to lose before I went into the fight. He's going to take me down, he's going to pass my guard, he's going to get into a dominant position, and he's going to submit me. That's exactly what happened.
Even if you are as dominant as a striker gets, if you don't have that grappling base,
Yeah.
it's concerning, to say the least.
Exactly. So it wasn't a compelling match, but I remember listening to the ring announcers, and they're trying to make it into a compelling match. And a lot, they tried to do it with misinformation. They lied about my fight record. They lied about my experience. They called me like one of the best strikers in all of China. I'm like, what the hell, man? Are you serious? Are you serious? Like, at the time, I would have described myself as a pretty mediocre kickboxer with a handful of MMA fights under my belt who was fighting for scraps to pay medical bills. That's why I was fighting. And they're hamming it up saying he's got a undefeated kickboxing record of like 29 wins and 0 losses. 30 of those wins by knockout, even though 30 is a greater number than 29, so I don't know how to do math. But they were saying ridiculous things, like talking me up like I was the second coming of Bruce Lee as far as striking goes, and trying to sell this like this is the compelling striker versus grappler matchup. I wonder who will win. Meanwhile, I walk out 30 pounds dehydrated, on the brink of death, barely able to stand, and exactly what I just described happened. He takes me down, passes my guard, gets into a dominant position, and submits me. The end. It's not compelling, it's not interesting, and
But there's something very distasteful about feeding an under-leveled opponent to
Oh, yeah.
a more
Yeah.
high-level fighter.
But it
Just
happens
to,
constantly.
To sell a show, to pad a record, to do whatever.
It happens constantly.
It's distasteful.
It happens a lot in boxing, because in the sport of boxing, boxers are not really allowed to lose and
That
still be
zero
respected.
is so important.
It is.
Which is
That
seems
undefeated.
ridiculous
It
to me.
is, man. It is. Like these guys who were like 5-0, they're acting like they're Rocky Marciano or Floyd Mayweather or something like that. Like, dude, you're not at that level, not even close, man. And even then, like, the greatest boxer of all time. This is highly arguable, but a lot of the boxing experts that I respect a lot will tell you it was Sugar Ray Robinson. And he had a ton of fights, but he also had a meaningful number of losses. And I think that's what made him such a great fighter as well. I mean, he had more losses than most of these undefeated fighters will ever have fights, man. And you can argue about that in the comments. Please do. Please tell me who you think was the greatest boxer of all time. But again, many of the boxing experts that I respect a great deal believe it's Sugar Ray Robinson, and I understand their point. I understand what they're getting at. I can see why they believe that. And I do respect that assessment. But man, that man lost a fair number of fights. He won way more than he lost, but he lost a fair number of fights. But in the modern boxing world, a guy like Sugar Ray Robinson, after his first loss, people would be calling him a bum these days. If he was doing the same thing he did back then, after that first loss, they'd say, he's a bum, he's finished, get him out of here. Next, let's get the next 5-0 fighter out here.
It does not make sense at all.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of an opinion I read on the Tenshin Nasukawa versus Floyd Mayweather boxing match that happened in Japan. For those of you that don't know, Tenshin Nasukawa is this Japanese kickboxing prodigy, but he's in a significantly lower weight class than Mr. Mayweather. And unsurprisingly, in a boxing bout, Tenshin got schooled pretty quick by Floyd. And I read this opinion that, well, first of all, Tenshin was visibly upset, crying after the loss. Him being a competitor and all, used to winning since very early in life. Back then he was like a teenager. Right now he's still in his very early 20s, I believe. But I read the opinion that this would not only not negatively affect Tenshin's fan base within Japan, it would boost his fan base. Because in Japanese culture, they love to see a warrior get defeated, get humbled, and then improve himself and come back stronger. Now, I'm not that well versed in Japanese culture. I don't know how true this is, but it seems to...
It's the idea that it's honorable to accept an unwinnable fight, basically.
Yeah, it seems that way. It seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. That's kind of the attitude I went into that Leandro Issa fight with, because I felt like I've got nothing to lose. He's the world champion. He's the third-degree black belt. He's the poster boy of the organization. I'm a nobody, right? And so if I win, if that would happen, it probably won't, but if I do, I'm the man. And if I lose, it's what people expected anyway, so whatever.
Fighters are too tough for their own good, man, and you too. Just the weight cut alone is very detrimental to your health. And I'm sure you knew that at the time, but...
Oh, I didn't know it as much as I know it now, man. If I knew back then what I knew now, I would tell all the people involved in setting up that fight, go screw yourselves, man. Get lost, I'm done.
That would have been the wise thing to do.
It would have, but...
We are not wise in our youth, most of us.
We're not, but it's also the way fighters, especially fighters in America, fighters of my era were brought up. This idea that you can't say no to a fight. The honorable thing is never say no to a fight, never back down from a fight.
But in reality, even the top level combat athletes need a team, need trustworthy coaches to help them assess whether a matchup is good or not, and this is especially important for prospects.
Yeah,
they need
they do. The top level guys need that. But here's what the low level guys had when I was coming up. We would get a phone call from a fight promoter, and they'd say, "Hey, we have a fight this weekend. Do you want it?" And we'd ask a couple of questions like, "Who's it against? This guy you've never heard of. Do you want the fight? We're putting it together. If not, we'll get somebody else." Like, how much does it pay? $50. Dang. Is there a win bonus? Yeah, $50. Okay, I really need that $50. Let's do it, right? And sometimes I would know who I was going to fight. Like, I get that call from the fight promoter. Hey, you want to fight this weekend? And it's always like, short notice like that. You want to fight this weekend? No. Do you want to take a fight 3 months in advance so you can do a proper training camp? Do you want to fight this weekend? That's how it was. Short notice, day of weigh-ins, which is actually pretty awesome. I wish all fight organizations would do that. But back then it was day of weigh-ins. You would step on the scale an hour before you got in the ring or in the cage. And then you would compete, like at your walking around weight. And man, that was great. I loved that, and I wish everybody would still do that. But every time I bring up this idea, all these nincompoops who have never fought before, never had to sit in the sauna and cut 30 pounds of water weight in one day and don't know what that's like, and don't know people who have actually died from cutting weight, have no clue what this is like, they will say, oh, but we can't do that, Ramsey, because if we do that, then it will create additional problems. Screw your additional problems, guys. You don't know what it's like. I'm getting kind of impassioned about this, but...
I understand.
But I need to be, because they don't know what it's like. We need to get rid of weight cutting.
It's such a
Like,
big
just
issue.
get rid of weight cutting. People are praising ONE FC right now, saying, oh, ONE FC is doing it the right way by having multiple weigh-ins across the week. And all that's doing is getting these fighters to dehydrate themselves multiple times.
But doesn't one...
That's not better for you.
Doesn't ONE FC have hydration level tests?
Yeah, they do. But all those fighters do is dehydrate themselves again and then rehydrate again and dehydrate themselves again and rehydrate. And they may not be cutting as much as their UFC counterparts, but they're still doing it multiple times and it's still not good for you. And it still creates this unnecessary element of the fight game that doesn't need to exist. Like, a fight is already hard enough. Training for a fight is already hard enough. When you have to battle weight on top of that, when you have to go through this whole extra game, there's actually a professional league of weight cutters who like sit in a sauna to see who can cut the most water weight in a sauna. Like, this is an actual sport that exists. It's like taking that ridiculous, stupid weight cutting sauna sport and then tacking that on to professional MMA or professional boxing and every other professional combat sport before you actually fight. It's stupid. It needs to end. I hate it so much and I can't speak strongly enough against it.
I've seen some of your commenters say that if all promotions do day off weigh-in, then a lot of fights will fall through. But it seems to me that it's a short...
Let them fall through.
It's a short pain that will lead to the solution of a long-term problem.
You'll have some backup guys. That's what they did in UFC 1 and UFC 2 and UFC 3. That's why Kirk Jenham, the ninja, became UFC champion of UFC 3. Do you remember that? They would have alternates, right? They would have the guys on the main card in the tournament. And if somebody was injured to the point they could not continue, one of the alternates would come in, right? So you have alternate bouts, okay? So what if your main event falls through because one guy is a bum or he's too fat or whatever, or he's having a thyroid issue, I don't know, and he just can't make the weight? What do? You have an alternate match, and maybe it's not as compelling as that fight that people bought the tickets for, but you do it anyway, right? When the UFC came to Shanghai and they did an event here in Shanghai, I bought tickets because Anderson Silva was on the card. Anderson Silva was going to fight. And he was going to fight Kevin Gastelum. Yeah. And Anderson Silva got busted for performance-enhancing drugs, he could not compete. And I was like, no, Anderson Silva, you have disappointed me once again. Ah! And they got Michael Bisping, bless his heart, Michael Bisping, just like a couple weeks after a all-out war with George St. Pierre, was it?
Might have been, not sure.
Anyway, he has this tremendous battle in the UFC. A couple weeks later, he comes, fills in for Anderson Silva so that the fight can go on. Okay? And that was like last minute planning. But what if the UFC had an alternate in advance? Okay, what if this fight falls through? If Anderson Silva can't make it, this guy will fight instead. And he is prepared, okay? If Kevin Gastelum can't make it, this other guy will fight instead. Okay? Or if the whole fight falls through, both of the alternates will fight each other instead. Okay? And if the alternate wins the belt, he wins the belt and he's the champion. Why not? Because if we have a motivation like that, people are going to stop missing weight. If the consequences for missing weight become that dire, people are going to start paying attention.
Chelson said that other sporting events fall through all the time.
Yeah, they do. So what are we so scared of? Because it's the fans that keep pushing this agenda. It's not so much the organizations, probably them a little bit, but the fans are the ones who keep pushing back when guys like me say, get rid of weight cutting. They're the ones who keep pushing this agenda, but if we get rid of weight cutting, then the fights will fall through and boo-hoo. So What? Let them fall through. And let those fighters hang their heads in shame and let the fans be mad at them so that they do better next time. Or fight in the correct weight class. I mean, if you don't have to cut weight, it's no mystery what you weigh. For example, I walk around 90 kilos right now. Okay? I weigh 90 kilos. And what are the weight classes in kilos? It's funny, I've dealt with the metric system for the last 12 years, so I know metrics better than pounds.
Let's find out.
Right now.
90.
But I have the weight classes memorized in pounds, but not in kilos.
Same.
So what's the closest weight class to 90 kilos? Hold on. Let me whip out my calculator too. Okay. So 90 kilos times 2.2 is 198. Okay. So that's above middleweight. Middleweight is 185. That's where middleweight tops out. So walking around at 198, I could not fight at middleweight. Right? And for a current UFC middleweight, I'm a pretty small guy compared to these huge guys who cut down to 185 from well above 200 pounds.
Well, you were a welterweight in your youth.
Well, I fought in 4 different weight classes.
Easy time cutting down to 155.
The first weight class I fought in was welterweight, and I walked around way less than 170. I walked around probably like 160, 165 when I was fighting as a welterweight. And I was fighting guys who were cutting down a little bit from 170 to get to 170, right? Then I fought as a lightweight at 155, and I didn't really cut to get to there because I was started walking around at around 155, right? So I knew in advance, I weigh 155 pounds soaking wet. When I step on the scales, I will weigh 155 pounds. And if for whatever reason the scale's a little off and I weigh 155 and a half pounds, I can go pee and spit in a bucket and jog a little bit and work up a sweat and then make weight, right? Because they'll give you like a half hour to make weight if you don't make weight when you step on the scale, okay? In that sort of case, right? And there's also the option of if you weigh a certain amount over within reason, then you can forfeit a certain amount of your purse if your opponent agrees to the fight, right? So that could still happen. That could totally still happen. So right now at 198, I know I would have to compete as a light heavyweight if there were day of weigh-ins. So I would be fighting guys who weighed between 185 and a half pounds to 205 pounds, okay? And that's reasonable walking around at 198 if everybody else was competing at their walking around weight. So if I'm fighting a guy who walks around at 205 and I weigh 198, that's a 7-pound difference. Not that big of a deal, okay? So, and I also know I could bulk up a little bit. I could bulk up to the maximum 205, get really lean, and then step on the scale, soaking wet at 205 pounds. I know my weight before I step on the scale. These guys who act like it's a mystery, these guys are confounding to me. Like these guys who step on the scale and they're like a whole weight class over and they're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, why did you even step on the scale, right? It's confusing, it's confounding. I've seen this many times. There's always that guy at the weigh-ins who steps on the scale a whole weight class over. And again, it's like, really?
That's unbelievable.
Wow, what a surprise. I gained 15 pounds overnight. Well, like, seriously?
Indeed.
Yeah, man, like we know the results before they step on the scales. We know it. There's no excuse for this in this day and age. There's no excuse. There was no excuse 50 years ago. So go ahead and make your excuses for why we should still have weight cutting in combat sports. Tell me, what is your excuse? I want to know. I want to know, and I guarantee it's not a good one. What do you think, Xiao?
I agree. I always thought weight cutting was a big issue in the sport. Didn't Darren Till almost die?
Probably.
He went blind.
Man, a lot of people have almost died weight cutting. Like
yeah, it's just one case.
What's her name? Cyborg. She did this tremendous weight cut, 30-pound weight cut.
Oh, no.
Now, she had a lot longer to do it than I did, but you can watch this on YouTube. You can watch her just suffering through a 30-pound weight cut over the course of several days, and it it kind of triggered some PTSD when I watched that, because I see her suffering and I'm like, I went through that. I know exactly what that's like. Actually, mine was worse because I did it in less than 24 hours. And she goes from this 30-pound weight cut, trying to get down to the teeny tiny division, because apparently there can only be small women's weight classes and nothing else. Because women can't possibly weigh 170 pounds, can they?
But they do. American women are obese.
Well, Cyborg's not obese. She's just a large athletic woman. And there are other large athletic women out there. There are some beautiful, fit, athletic women who weigh over 200 pounds and they're not obese. They're just large, strong, tall women. I'm not
Male
talking about
heavyweight
obesity
class.
at all.
Male heavyweight class too, right?
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
capped at 260.
Yeah, man. And I also wish there was a super heavyweight division. Like no upper weight limit. That would be interesting. That would answer so many questions.
Oh yeah, it will.
We should talk about some of those questions next time. But as it is,
Wow, we've been podcasting for
we've been
hours.
podcasting for hours. This is a long one. So I'm going to sign off, go home, get to bed, get something to eat. Probably not in that order. Xiao, anything else you want to add to this podcast before we finish?
Stay tuned for a full version of my fight being posted on Ramsey's channel. I would love to see some keyboard warriors criticize me and be not impressed with my performance.
Yeah, man. Just yesterday, there was some dude in the comments ragging on Xiao because he was in one of my technique videos, and this guy's like, "Oh, your assistant sucks. I can tell. If he was in a real fight, he'd get his butt kicked even by an absolute amateur half his size," or some nonsense like that. I'm like, dude, he just had his first amateur fight yesterday, and he totally won in dominant fashion, and it was awesome. Shut your fool mouth. Anyway, the keyboard warriors of the internet do not care about facts. They care about validation. That being said, keyboard warriors, I don't disrespect you. I respect the fact that you have made it this far, if you did, for all 7 of you who are still watching this podcast. That being said, thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.